So one of the challenges is always, what's the data? What kind of data do we actually have? And so as we think about defense, we talk about war environments, talk about difficulty getting data. What's the data source? How are we thinking about it? So in looking at it, I'm going to really ask our panelists is to help us understand what it is that this environment looks like. So we're lucky enough, let's see, down at the end to have Scott Stevens. Scott is an investor structuring capital for NATO, U.S. government-aligned defense logistics and procurement. So really in looking at it, he has some unique access and even some security clearance through different businesses that allows him to look at things much different. Next to him, that beautiful lady in red, Jen Bawden, as we've heard a little bit earlier, is a national security specialist, led the Congressional EMP task force and briefed both Presidents Obama and Trump on risks associated with EMP. And then my data itself is flawed. Next we have Alex Fesiak, who's Canadian entrepreneur with Ukrainian roots and a co-founder of NA Innovations, deploying frontline defense, dual-use technologies across Ukraine's active war environment. And I see we actually have a fixed wing visitor with us as well. So who knows what else is flying around in here, but we shall see. And then last but certainly not least, it's Irina, who comes to us, former Special Forces, Lieutenant Colonel in the Ukrainian Army, and has spent years in not 1, 2, 3, but actually 4 active war zones, something that I have no aspiration to duplicate. But her expertise, PhD in psychology, and taught at the Ukrainian War College negotiations. So very active across a number of different fronts, as well as working with groups of orphans and trying to help folks that are less fortunate than us. So Scott, I think it would be really helpful because you come at this from a really different angle, having run assets for, 20, 30 years, and really looking with a different lens. So maybe you can really help us understand, as you think about risk and evaluating data, how do you perceive, and look at data, and how do you sort of think through it as you're evaluating data that you're getting? Some of it you may not even be able to talk about, so that makes it even tougher with investors.
The first investment fund I worked at was called Coatue Capital, and this was 25 years ago, and the whole premise was to use technology, data science, and machine learning across public and private markets. So we've had a long history of doing that. I think some of the issue with data is trying to figure out the signal from the noise. And so I think a lot of the time that we're spending is taking massive amounts of data, how do we refine it to actually actionable items? I think right now when you look at the government has pretty much infinite data, but has a huge problem of how to figure out what to do with that data. So we spend a lot of time of how do we sort that data, there's structured data or unstructured data. So we have a chief data scientist, we have a chief AI officer, which we did not have before, and so we're using AI tools to go through data a lot quicker than we used to, which I think is a huge advantage. And I would say in general, you then also have to have some common sense. A lot of the data that you get, you still need human elements of QC and QA. There's a lot of data that you'll see through AI that's actually not correct. And so we spend a lot of time of getting data sets, filtering it, structuring it, and how we do that, and we do it dynamically. So we're doing things in real time, which I think the government is trying to do a better job of how to do things quickly, with speed, with accuracy, and then how to do that. On the investment side, I would say a lot of the data that's done is good for investment, but most of it is not data-driven. Most of it is emotional-driven. It's about do they like businesses, not like businesses. We live in a very quantitative business, and so we try to make sure that we are not doing things just qualitatively, but very quantitatively as well.
Cool, thank you. Jen, you have an interesting background where after 9/11, we found ourselves with a whole new concept of Homeland Security, and you actually had bought a Homeland Security business. Can you talk us a little bit about what were those decision points that you looked at? What are the things you would wish you had thought about? What are some of those things that, as you're evaluating data, that you evaluated, but also maybe families should think about some more, so as they're looking at defense-related investments?
Right. Well, I wanted to make my family's money and my friends' money follow on. I wanted to make as big a difference as we could. And I had found a technology with my partner. My co-founder. We found it from the bowels of the Department of Energy. He's a scientist. And we found a technology that we basically ended up turning into and becoming the lead technology stopping nuclear weapons from getting smuggled across the ports and the borders. And so I felt that when I woke up every day, because it was really hard, and my son Josh, who's in the front row over there, just came here for 2 days from college. You know, I had him, and he was two years old. So I had to build this Homeland Security company from scratch, and that was not easy with a 2-year-old son. But I said every day, hey, if I stop a nuclear weapon from blowing New York City, my home up, then I've done something really big for the world. And that's really honestly what kept me going, was just trying to make as big a difference as I can. So I think if you're going to put a lot of money and you're going to build something and put a lot of time into it, make sure it's something you really believe in, because you can only build a few companies in your lifetime, because it's a really time-consuming project.
Thanks, Jen. And Alex, you're active in Ukraine, so again, and not a place that I really have a huge interest in visiting today. But help us understand, as you go into Ukraine, you're talking to different entities, you're helping people think about what those needs may be. What are the evaluations that you do, and how do you weigh information you get? Help us understand, how all that works, and even if you've made a mistake or two, what are those challenges out there?
Right. So usually you do, when you evaluate something, right, you have to rely on your prior history, your expertise in some way.
Yeah.
So with me, I'm Canadian born. I lived in Kiev, Ukraine, the last 5 years, right? So any innovations, just a little bit on that. So we're a defense consulting firm. How do we evaluate? So my background's in semiconductors, 30 plus years. So I've worked in companies such as Motorola, Freescale, NXP, worked with Qualcomm folks, TI, Intel. So that's my background, right? Tech. So when we're working with Ukrainian startups or directly with Ukrainian military brigades, if they're looking for some type of piece of technology, I rely on my network, my own personal history of what I understand of those technologies, and evaluate it accordingly, right? When a startup comes to us and they're developing something, they're a startup. They're usually within Ukraine. There's a lot of young folks that are putting products together and technologies together, and they may not be aware of what's going on in Silicon Valley or maybe in Texas or some other parts of the world where folks are developing tech. And that's sort of my focus, is to bring that tech to Ukraine to help the war effort and help these folks build their own companies and properly and expand. So that's how I'd answer that question.
Great. Interesting. And Irina, your world is one so different than mine, and yet I wish I had all those skills that you have. So, in profiling, so you're negotiating with Russia or the United States, or in representing your country. What kind of work did you do and helping to think about who it is you're going in up against? And it's just interesting to me to think about, okay, here I am negotiating these full-on treaties or expectations, and how do you go in and profile those? And then tell me how different that is when you're negotiating in a boardroom versus in actual right in the war zone itself. I mean, it seems like very big difference, right? Bombs going off, you've got people's lives at risk right in front of you. Is that a different decision making, or is it the same? Or help me understand what that looks like.
Thank you for your questions. Hello, everyone. So the first of all, I can tell you that negotiation is an art, And everyone can learn that. I really love it and enjoy it. And the hardest for me was not with Russia. The hardest part of negotiation for me was with Taliban in August 2021 when America left Kabul, because that was a new environment for me. And that's what Alan mentioned. That's the difference between negotiation and boardroom. So you come to nice office in the suit, you're relaxed. You know, one your mistake, you might be fired or something else. On the battlefield, you understand the worth of it is your life or someone else's life. It's like the last chance you have to speak, to be heard. You might be killed, or the people might be killed. I used to negotiate to exchange prisoners.
I'm gonna just jump in here because I know the backstory here a little bit, and maybe so. You may remember that a couple of years ago, the U.S. exited Kabul. There was a lot of political discourse around that. We saw photos of folks trying to jump onto planes. One of our panelists decided that she would, I think she says, get my Nikes, and my Levi's and my headscarf and go to the airport. And so being retired Special Forces, she was able to convince somebody to give her a plane and went into Kabul by herself to negotiate with the Taliban. I don't want to negotiate with the Taliban. I can't imagine how they saw her. Well, maybe I can imagine, but I won't state that. But so she's talking about negotiating with folks that may not allow her to leave with her head, right? Or sort of worse. So it just gives me a little like, okay, so that's the environment you're saying. That environment versus a boardroom, right? So, but a lot of us may find ourselves in the same thing. I mean, it may not be the same, it's certainly not the same, but it's emotions. We're negotiating for a deal, whatever. We're in the middle of something and we open our mouth and like maybe, so it's just interesting to hear how you think about it. So I wanted to make sure the room understood. You've got yourself by yourself with the Taliban looking at you like, here's a crazy Ukrainian who thinks she's gonna leave with other people and wants us to let these people go. And on the other hand, you know, you have your suit on and you're in NATO or something. So how do you look at those are different, I get it, those are different audiences.
Yeah, but I believe in people, and I believe the biggest treasure in this world are people. Yeah, technology is great, but who is going to use those technologies? People. Defense is great, but how we can defend our countries without people, without their mental stability, without understanding how they make decisions. So for me to fight for people, doesn't matter where, or it's going to be on battlefield, or it's going to be on the boardroom. So I'm going to be there, and I can do my best. Is it easy? From now, I can say yes. From that time, I would not say yes, because it takes a lot of energy, a lot of health, a lot of tears, honestly, because I have fear too. And most of my fear was, even when I talked to Taliban, I told them, hey guys, I'm not scared to lose my life. I have already cross on my neck, so I believe in God, and the life in heaven. But I'm going to be sorry for my mom and dad because they did not deserve it. They did not deserve to have their kid in the black trash bag, right? So that was the common ground between me and them. And that's the art of negotiation. Just find a common ground. That's the key.
Thank you. Now, well, different, Alex, you're out in that environment, at least in Ukraine, trying to understand what people need and then deliver resources to them. So in some ways, you're also hearing a different type of voice. And how do you weigh that, and how do you think about what's that demand curve look like, and how quickly do you have to deliver on something like that?
It really depends on what the folks are looking for, right? So to deliver, we try to be as effective and as efficient as we possibly can. Ukraine is at war, and I always feel highest priority that I need to help anyone that's asking for that help as quickly as possible. There's no I'll get back to you next week, 2 weeks. So it's kind of a vicious cycle, but I kind of thrive on it, to be honest. I like when things work. I like pushing things forward. Very dynamic, right? There's so many things that are going on, changing. This didn't work, try something else. There's a whole lot of that ideation happening. From a pure technology standpoint, if I divide that out, it's exciting for people that love technology, work in tech, because there's so much innovation going on there. And a lot of, I say this boldly, right? If you're not in Ukraine with the drone, then you're not a drone company. There are just so many things going on. The drone that we've got on display here was designed by Ostrich Air, which are working towards filling in some gaps on technologies that are not currently in Ukraine. To build something like this, you need to understand where those gaps are. You need to understand the needs of different teams to be able to put such a platform together. So.
Thanks for that, a little extra sound there. Yeah, Alex, I know other venture firms as well looking and realizing that if you think about the internet, it was developed by Department of Defense, right? So what we see is, one of the leading technology countries being sort of in that same situation that Irina talked about, forced, life or death, how fast can we develop? And a lot of people also saying, hey, there's some valuable IP here, and it can be exported one day. So a lot of interest there. Now, Jen, I'm like reminded of how it was like after 9/11. We knew nothing. U.S. had never been attacked. All of a sudden, you're coming up. You're the sole company that is helping us identify the risk of nuclear armament coming across our borders. We couldn't even monitor a few individuals on planes, let alone things coming across the borders. So I know it's sort of just so you know, like this, the FAR 2 on the other end, I can't find out what, but they both got some sort of levels of security clearance. They can't tell me because I have no clearance, but that's our security clearance group over there. But Jen, so you're entering a whole new world. You've got technology. What was it like talking to the U.S. government and trying to revamp our whole thing literally overnight as we're, theoretically under attack? How did you how do you do that?
Hello? Does this work?
You're good. I think you're good.
Okay. So I was from the family office world. So I always believed that start at the top. That's what my grandfather did. That's what my father did. They started at the top. And so lucky for me and the country, one of my father's close business partners was George Bush Sr. And his son happened to be in the White House at the time. So I, being a pretty ballsy little Canadian girl, said, I'm going to go right to George Bush Jr. And my partners were like, what? What? You can get to the president? I said, sure, why not? His dad's a good friend of my dad's. And I'd met the father. So I was able to get information on our technology company to the president to help him mandate that 100% of cargo containers needed to be checked. And there was only one technology in America because we, as Americans, North Americans, we could not use other technology from other countries because we have to protect our keynote Homeland Security technology. So I was able to get him to sign into law, and there's only one company that could do this, and that was us. So that was a great start for us. So, so that's probably part of the answer.
Thank you. And, I've got to applaud you because in looking at it, the thing I'm seeing about this panel is that while this panel has access, it also has, so I'll call it guts, right? Where in other words, just because you have access doesn't mean people necessarily utilize it. And I think that's one of the things that whether I know there's some next gen here, and that is some of the opportunity that many family members have is an opportunity to really get access or utilize that access, but most don't do it. So I think that's what I really start to see is those that stand out don't don't just have it, they use it. They, and I think we all need to find ways to do that. And I know, in looking at it, Scott does the same. He's had sort of a unique way to get access to some deals and opportunities as folks are coming on board. And maybe as we think about NATO and promises, Scott, and things that are going on in the U.S. government, it seems like there's a lot of opportunity and need for financing. I'm kind of curious, like, how do you utilize that access, or how did you find opportunities in that overall space? Because you primarily work with U.S. government-related individuals or companies, I guess. So maybe you can describe a little bit of that, because I think it's a very unique set of opportunities that you provide.
So we bought a company 9 years ago that was a government and defense contractor, and it wasn't. We didn't know at the time what we were really buying, and so we got into it somewhat by accident. Within that, we got a bunch of government contracts and programs. We've purchased now our 7th company in that space, and then we're going to probably purchase 2 or 3. One of the reasons that we've purchased so many companies is not because we want to, because the government is asking us. And one of the issues is you're getting a lot of companies that are either subcontractors or suppliers to aerospace, defense, maintenance, repair, and the people who started them are 60, 70, or 80, and you need someone who has security clearance to buy them. So a lot of times it's not even us looking. The government is telling us where they need financing and capital. Surprisingly, although there's a lot of people who are doing defense and defense tech, there are very, very few investment firms that have people with security clearance. It's usually an advisor. It's usually someone who served in the military or DoD or Pentagon. So we have people who served in the government, people who served in the military at our firm. We have probably 12 people who have security clearance. We'll probably have another 10 next year. And so that allows us to do things that other people cannot. I would say in terms of access to capital, the government is very inefficient, but they are well aware. It's not as if I speak to the government and they tell us that they're efficient. They're frustrated, and so what's happened now is the new administration is really pushing on private capital to help. So there are multiple initiatives for strategic initiatives. There's the Office of Strategic Capital. The Army has started effectively what I would call like a venture incubator. So the government is very aware of this, and they're trying to move faster. They're trying to get rid of the bureaucracy. So we started a credit fund 4 years that specifically lends to government and defense contractors. And so typically when we started, we had to go and find people to lend to, but it was very easy because there's a lot. Now the government has specifically told us, these are the areas we want you to lend, port, maritime, cybersecurity, AI, manufacturing, pharmaceutical. They've given us a list. And so the government, I think, is being a lot better about public-private partnerships, and they're actually reaching out to the public and private sector to actually fix this problem much faster than ever, because there's just too many prime contractors that take too long to get product to market, and that is changing very quickly. But you'll see a lot more people who will get in this space, but there's a lot of opportunity to help in the private sector.
So can you give us any idea? I mean, to me, it doesn't seem like this is a new thing that the Trump administration's really been doing in going to the private sector. Any idea, like it seems to me like it's got to be a multiple as far as the amount of securities that are going to be coming online that have some sort of direct relationship to the U.S. government, U.S. military. But
yeah, I mean, onshore manufacturing is part of that. Port maritime security, energy is part of that. There's a lot of different parts that's occurring. I would say some of this has been, but it's at a very small scale. And I would say the other part that's not U.S. based is they've specifically asked, they've started effectively a DSR bank in the EU to basically go back and help and effectively get a Department of Defense bank equivalent, right, to help in NATO rearmament so they can get to their commitment of 5% of GDP spend. So there's a U.S. part of that, and then there's a NATO part of that. And so NATO is the other area that I think you'll see a lot more companies like ourselves that we're going to have to open a European office. We're going to help effectively to rearm a lot of NATO around Ukraine. That's really the conversation that's occurring right now also. And I think you'll see a lot more spend. Now, part of that NATO spend is going to have to go to U.S. manufacturers. That's typically the NATO standards of how they do that. So I do think you'll see more credit funds, but this also goes back to, do you have security clearance? Do you understand government procurement? Do you understand government contracting? Do you understand the risk of these contracts? Do you understand the technological risk? I mean, it is a very complicated ecosystem. And so typically when you see people talk about it, you can see pretty clearly like who is involved in day-to-day and who is someone who is just venture investing in cool technology, right? The technology is needed, but there's a lot of things that are just supply chain logistics. We have some stuff that we're doing that's more military related, but a lot of this stuff is just moving things around and how do you get to move things around faster.
Scott, I'm realizing I'm asking you like too many questions, yeah. and I'm running out of time, so I'm gonna interrupt you for a second and move on for some quick questions. But Jen, you had challenge. You had worked with the government, and yet talk about how difficult it is to make money working with the government. You're saving our lives, but meanwhile, what's the business side of that, and what do you have to worry about?
Okay, so the biggest thing you have to worry about, we did make a lot of money. We were producing technology, we were protecting ports and borders. Very luckily, we received a $165 million contract from Department of Homeland Security and other government entities, which is a really big deal for a small company. And our valuation was to move from there tremendously. We would have been $1 billion company very quickly, and then the Democrats got in. And the Republicans got in, and the Democrats were very upset because all the money was taken away. It's exactly what happened to us, because if you were a Homeland Security company, and I think I'd spent 8 years and watched my son, as my son was a little boy growing up, I spent 8 years, day and night, working to try to save the country. He's still a little angry that I didn't visit him at his boarding school, but I was trying to save the country, Josh. I hope you're not still upset at me for not coming to his boarding school on his birthday, but I was trying my best as a single mom. Anyway, I'll hear about that later. But so now sequestration came, and I said to Dave, we're naked, and we're naked, and the water is going out. And he said, don't worry, we're so important. There's a 0 chance that we'll be touched. Everybody else will be taken before we are. And all Democrats got in and just looked at anything over 100 million and said, stop, 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 stop. We don't know what this is. Cancel, 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 cancel. We just got $1 trillion back from canceling everything that had to be doing to try to save
Jen,
America.
I'm gonna jump in because I'm getting the
So
hook.
that
I'm
was
getting
it.
the hook, and it's painful out
Okay.
here. But I want to make
No
sure
problem.
so in looking at it, not only just data, but it's also like control, politics.
Yes, politics.
So Alex, real quickly, like when you think about politics, 30 seconds. What do you think about, and how do you manage that for your clients?
Comments on politics. Well, it's a good question. That's a damn good question. I think we're going to solve that here. But look, every country, every group has got their own sort of political landscape, right? You can call them landmines, you can call them what have you. But it's just, understanding the landscape, right? Understanding what can be achieved, who are the right contacts, what is possible, what is not possible, right? You need to understand the lay of the land, right? We have these similar discussions with clients of ours that want to come to Ukraine, want to do business. You've got to get a hold of the right people to understand how to do business in that country. It's the same in the United States or Brazil or what have you, right? So that's important to just understand that landscape.
All right. Thank you all. I appreciate it. Irina, I'm going to invite people to talk to you afterwards if they want secrets on negotiation or high-powered, negotiations and thought. And I want to thank the panel, and I'm sorry for the time delay here. All right? Thank you.